Texas will not apply for the federal race to the top funding. And the reason for that is because our state and our communities must reserve the right to decide how we educate our children and not surrender that control to a federal bureaucracy. This program's not a race to the top, it's a sprint to the middle, to mediocrity. We're seeing soaring costs and one-size-fits-all approaches that are going to leave our children ill-equipped to compete in the global economy that we find ourselves in today. The funding in question is certainly tempting, but it's one-time money. The obligations that we're being asked to undertake, including things like adopting national standards and tests, would be with us for years to come. Banking on the fact that cash-strapped states are going to sign away their futures for some upfront money, Washington's hoping to expand its power, making it practically impossible for states to win funding without accepting new national education standards and tests, which, by the way, standards and tests that haven't even been written yet. There's a chance that when they are written, they could end up being less stringent than the ones that we already have. To me and to a lot of education experts and parents across our state, that smacks of a federal takeover of our public schools. Here in Texas, and even in this room, we don't have broad consensus on every issue that's facing our school system, but we do all agree that we'd much rather work those differences out in Texas with solutions that work for Texans instead of accepting a top-down mandate from some distant bureaucrats. Race to the top doesn't make sense financially either. You know, adopting these new unseen standards would require us to purchase new testing materials, new teacher development tools, new textbooks, and we've calculated that such measures would cost the state of Texas close to $3 billion, all in a bid to snare as little as $75 per student, or about the cost of the average textbook in Texas today. You know, knowing how D.C. works, we'd probably get less than that, Robert, but it could very well end up to what I call the dumbing down of the very rigorous standards that we've worked so hard to put into place over the last several years. These standards were developed. They were developed through an open process of working with teachers, administrators, business leaders, and recently adopted by our elected members of the legislature and the elected State Board of Education. And again, I think all of us would rather see those individuals deciding rather than bureaucrats in Washington. Together, we have collectively created a system of educational standards and accountability that has earned Texas praise all across this country. For example, we were one of the first states to make college-ready curriculum the standard. We've increased transparency, making officials more accountable. We've offered troubled schools and districts the tools they need to turn themselves around. And the results speak for themselves. In the past school year, tax scores were up in every subject and every grade. The dropout rate has decreased. Texas was recognized as one of only 4 states to be closing the achievement gap in math. If Washington were truly concerned about funding education with solutions that match local challenges, they'd make the money available to they'd make the money available to states without strings attached. Instead, they roll out this race to the top and its tangle of red tape. when you think about this coming on the heels of this health care debate, Washington is attempting to take over yet another very essential function and make even more personal decisions for our citizens. You know, the question is, do Texans want to experience the mediocrity of an unresponsive, inefficient federal government in yet another key part of our lives? You can be sure a competitive state like Texas is right in their crosshairs. and don't just take this as me making that statement. Let me give you a quote from Arnie Duncan, who is the Secretary of Education. He said just last year, "If we accomplish one thing in the coming years, it should be to eliminate the extreme variation in standards across America." Now, I would suggest that is spoken like a true bureaucrat, more concerned with control and comfortable predictability than with innovation, with effectiveness, with competition, or most importantly, genuinely improving the lives of our children. Like they do in nearly every arena, Washington wants one standard, a standard they control for all 50 states, mandating one approach to teaching children, no matter where these kids come from, their background, the size of their community, or the nature of their specialized needs. Soon after Secretary Duncan's speech, Race to the Top was slipped into the so-called stimulus bill. This legislative sleight of hand was, I think, a cynical attempt to sidestep state protections included in the federal No Child Left Behind legislation that was passed in 2003 that clearly stated, as a matter of fact, it prohibited the use of federal funds for the creation of national standards and tests. Race to the Top is clearly an effort to entice states into abdicating responsibility and surrendering their legal rights in exchange for some short-term, immediate money. Instead of mandating another one-size-fits-all solution, Washington should be encouraging competition between the states to develop the best standards and programs, because competition is what fuels innovation, which is how things get done better, faster, more efficiently. Unfortunately, that kind of competition represents a race that Washington would rather not run, because they know they'll lose, when what they really desire is control. Texas is on the right path towards improved education. So we'd be foolish and I think irresponsible to place our children's future in the hands of unelected bureaucrats thousands of miles away in Washington, D.C., and to virtually eliminate parents' participation in their children's education. That is why we are declining participation in the race to the top.